My name is Sarah. I'm 45 years old, and for 18 years, I was the lead engineer and employee number 3 at a tech company called Invire. You might have heard of it. You might have even used our products. For a while there, we were everything. We were the future. And I know that because I built it from the ground up. It's funny how clearly you can remember the beginning of things, isn't it? The end is always a blur of shock and pain. But the beginning is crystal clear. For me, the beginning smells like cold pizza, stale coffee, and the faint metallic scent of a hot soldering iron. Our first office wasn't an office at all. It was Mark's garage. Mark was employee number 1. The CEO, the visionary. I was employee number 3, the architect, the builder. When I met Mark, he was electric. You know the type. He had this energy that filled every room he was in. His eyes would light up when he talked about his ideas, and he spoke so fast it was like he was trying to catch up to his own brain. He had this grand vision for a platform that would revolutionize how businesses manage their customer data. It was ambitious. It was borderline impossible, and I was immediately completely and utterly hooked. Our first server was a stack of mismatched desktop computers on a metal shelf from a hardware store. We ran extension cords from every outlet in his house. His wife was a saint, I'll tell you that. She'd bring us sandwiches and tell us to remember to sleep. We rarely listened. We'd code for 16, 17 hours straight, fueled by cheap energy drinks and this shared belief, this absolute unshakable certainty that we were on the verge of creating something special. That's where I started building what I would eventually call Cerberus. It was the heart of everything, the central nervous system of Invire. It wasn't just a database or a piece of software. To me, it was alive. I wasn't just writing lines of code. I was teaching it how to think. I was weaving together logic and data streams into this complex, intricate tapestry. Every late night, every frustrating bug, every breakthrough at 3 a.m. was like laying another stone in a great cathedral that only I could see the full blueprint for. I remember one night, it must have been 2005. We were trying to solve a data syncing problem that had been plaguing us for weeks. We were exhausted. Mark was pacing back and forth, muttering about venture capitalists and deadlines. I was just staring at the screen, my eyes burning, and then I saw it. It was a tiny, elegant solution. Not a brute force attack, but a graceful little pirouette of logic that solved everything. I typed it out, my fingers flying. I hit execute. We watched the logs scroll by on the monitor, and it worked. It just worked. Mark stopped pacing. He just stood behind me, looking at the screen. He didn't say anything for a full minute. Then he put his hand on my shoulder and squeezed. "Sarah," he said, and his voice was thick with awe. "You're a magician." We didn't cheer. We didn't high-five. We just stood there in the quiet hum of the machines, in that dingy garage, and felt the tectonic plates of our future shift beneath our feet. We both knew in that moment that we were going to make it, and we did. We got our first round of funding. I'll never forget the day Mark came back from that meeting, his tie askew, a wild grin on his face. He held up a check, and it was for more money than I had ever seen in my life. We didn't even know what to do. I think we went to a Denny's to celebrate. A Grand Slam breakfast at 10 p.m. That was us. The biggest day, though, the day that felt like we'd truly arrived, was the day we moved into our first real office. It was a small space in a boring corporate park, but to us, it was the Taj Mahal. It had a real reception area. It had a kitchen. It had separate bathrooms. It was luxury. We spent that first day just walking around, touching the walls. We ordered a dozen pizzas and sat on the floor because we hadn't bought any furniture yet. Mark pulled out a camera, a little point and shoot, and insisted on a picture. I still have it. Look at us. Young, full of hope. We thought we were invincible. We thought we were partners. We were going to change the world together. And for a long, long time, we did. We really did. The golden years. They were bright. They were real. And I think that's what makes the rest of this story so hard to tell because you have to understand how much I loved it. You have to understand how much of my life, my soul, I poured into that company. You have to understand that it wasn't just a job. It was my baby, and I never, ever imagined it would grow up to break my heart.
Success is a powerful chemical. It's an accelerant. It can forge bonds of steel, but if you're not careful, it can also act as a solvent, quietly dissolving the very things that made you strong in the first place. For Innovire, the success was a tidal wave. We went from a dozen employees to 50, then 100. Then 500. We weren't in a small office park anymore. We had 3 floors in a gleaming glass tower downtown. The view was incredible. But the higher we got, the more I felt like we were losing our foundation. The change in Mark was the most noticeable. The hoodie and jeans were replaced by tailored Italian suits. The frantic, passionate brainstorming sessions were replaced by closed-door board meetings. He stopped talking about the code and the product. Instead, he started using a new language. When I didn't speak, a language of synergies and leveraging assets and optimizing for shareholder value. He spent more time with investors in New York than he did with the engineers who were actually building his company. He started to look at the company not as a creation, but as a machine for making money. And in that kind of machine, every part is replaceable. The first time I felt it, the first real sting, was in a quarterly strategy meeting. We were about 10 years in. The room was filled with new faces, mostly VPs and directors with impressive MBAs and zero institutional knowledge. One of them, a guy named Bryce, who was our new chief operations officer, put up a slide about operational inefficiencies. And right there, circled in red, was a component of Cerberus. My component. He said it was clunky, that it required too much manual oversight, and that it was a bottleneck. I waited for him to finish, my heart pounding. I calmly raised my hand. I said, Bryce, I appreciate the analysis, but that component you've highlighted is complex for a reason. It handles legacy data from our first-generation clients. It has built-in redundancies to prevent data corruption that an automated system wouldn't account for. It's not a bottleneck. It's a safeguard. I expected Mark to back me up. The old Mark would have done that. He would have jumped in and said, listen to Sarah. She knows the system better than anyone. But he didn't. He just sat at the head of the long mahogany table, steepling his fingers. He looked at Bryce, then at me, and he said, I appreciate the history, Sarah, but Bryce has a point. We need to be looking forward. We need fresh perspectives. We can't be held hostage by old architecture. Held hostage. That was the word he used. I shut down. I nodded, looked down at my notepad, and didn't say another word for the rest of the meeting. It was like a gut punch. In that one moment, I went from being the architect to being part of the old architecture. I wasn't a person with 18 years of experience. I was a problem to be solved, a legacy cost. And that was the first crack in the foundation. A tiny hairline fracture, but it was there. And I knew, deep down, that it was only going to get wider. From that day on, things were different. My role became less about innovation and more about, well, they called it maintenance. I was the keeper of the old ways. The new, young, hotshot engineers they hired out of Stanford and MIT would come in with their grand ideas to rewrite everything. They'd look at my code, the code that had powered the company for over a decade, and they'd scoff. They'd say, this is so procedural. We could do this in 1/10 of the lines with this new framework. They didn't understand. They didn't see the ghosts in the machine. They didn't know about the patch I wrote at 2 a.m. on a Christmas Eve to keep a server from crashing. They didn't know about the hard-coded exceptions for our first ever client, a client we had bent over backwards to accommodate and whose business had literally put us on the map. They just saw old, messy code. I saw a history, a living document of our company's entire journey. The most telling moment, the real foreshadowing of what was to come, happened about a year before the end. A junior engineer, a kid named Kevin, who was very bright and dangerously arrogant, decided my nightly data sync script was inefficient. This script was one of the most delicate parts of Cerberus. It was a a finely tuned dance of operations that had to happen in a perfect sequence. I told him, Kevin, don't touch that script. If you think you can improve it, write a proposal and we can review it together. But don't just go in and change things. Of course, he didn't listen. He was a hotshot. He optimized it. I got a call at 3 a.m. on a Saturday. It was the head of support. The system was down. Not just slow, but completely, utterly down. Databases were being corrupted in real time. It was a 5-alarm fire. I logged in, and my blood ran cold. I saw immediately what he had done. His optimized script had created a race condition, a tiny timing error that was causing the database to essentially eat itself. It took me 36 straight hours to fix it. 36 hours of painstaking, nerve-wracking work. I had to restore from backups, manually patch corrupted records, and rebuild the indexes from scratch. I basically lived at my desk. I saved the company, and I'm not being dramatic, from millions of dollars in damages and a level of data loss that would have been catastrophic. On Monday morning, I got an email. It wasn't from Kevin, who was hiding from me. It was from Mark. The entire email was 2 sentences. It seems we had significant downtime over the weekend. We need to implement stricter protocols to minimize this kind of drama in the future. That was it. No, thank you. No, what happened? No, good job saving us. Just drama. My 36 hours of saving his company was drama. He didn't see me as the firefighter. He just saw the smoke and was annoyed by the inconvenience. That's when I knew. I knew I wasn't seen as an asset anymore. I was a liability. I was the person associated with the problems, not the solutions. I was the ghost of Innovire past, haunting his shiny, new, profitable machine. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that it was only a matter of time before he decided to exorcise me. The end, when it came, didn't arrive with a bang. It came with the quiet, unassuming ping of a calendar notification. It was a Tuesday. I remember the light was gray and flat outside my window, threatening rain. I was on my second cup of coffee, debugging a particularly nasty little bug in the billing module. It was a normal day, a completely, utterly, painfully normal day. And then the ping. A new meeting invite popped up on my screen. It was for 11 a.m. in an hour. The title was just Quick Sync. The sender was a name I barely recognized. Camila Rodriguez, the new head of HR. Mark was listed as an attendee. No agenda, no context. My stomach dropped. You know that feeling? That icy, sinking feeling when your intuition screams at you that something is very wrong. It's a primal animal instinct. I stared at that invite for a full minute. Quick sync. It's such a meaningless corporate phrase. So sterile. So final. I knew. In that moment, I knew what was about to happen. 18 years. And it was going to end with a quick sync. I spent the next hour in a daze. I tried to keep working on the bug, but my hands were shaking slightly. I couldn't focus on the code. All I could think about was the walk I was about to take. The walk to the top floor. At 10:58 a.m., I closed my laptop. I stood up. My little corner of the office, the one I'd occupied for a decade, suddenly felt foreign to me. The posters on the wall, the collection of nerdy toys on my monitor, the worn spot on my chair, it all seemed like it belonged to someone else. A few of my team members looked up at me. I think they saw it on my face. They gave me these small, questioning, sympathetic looks. I just gave them a weak smile and started walking. The elevator ride up to the executive floor felt like an eternity. The doors opened onto a different world. Down on the engineering floor, it was a chaotic symphony of keyboards clicking, quiet conversations, and the hum of servers. Up here, it was silent. Thick carpets muffled every sound. The art on the walls was abstract and expensive. It smelled like money and air freshener. Mark's office was at the end of the hall, a huge glass box with a view of the entire city. His door was closed. I could see their silhouettes through the frosted glass. I took a deep breath, knocked once, and walked in. There they were. Mark, sitting behind his massive, empty desk, and Camilla, the HR woman, in a chair beside it. She had a neat little folder sitting on her lap. She smiled at me, a practiced, professional, utterly meaningless smile. Mark didn't. He couldn't even look at me. He was staring at something on his computer screen, his jaw tight. "Hi, Sarah. Thanks for coming in," Camilla began, her voice smooth and even. "Please have a seat." I didn't sit. I just stood there in the middle of the room, my arms crossed. "What's this about, Mark?" I asked, my voice quieter than I expected. He finally looked up, just for a second. His eyes, which used to be so full of fire and excitement, were flat, empty.
Camilla will walk you through it, he mumbled, and looked back down at his screen. He was a coward. In that moment, that's all I could see. A complete and utter coward. Camilla opened her folder. "Sarah," she said, launching into a script that she had probably recited 100 times. "As you know, the market is constantly evolving, and Innovire is undergoing a strategic restructuring to better position ourselves for future growth. As part of this realignment, we've had to make some difficult decisions regarding personnel. Unfortunately, your position as lead engineer has been eliminated." The words just hung there in the silent, air-conditioned room, eliminated, like I was a bug in the code, a line item on a budget. 18 years, eliminated. I didn't react. I just kept looking at Mark, at the top of his head as he stared intently at his monitor, pretending to be busy. "I don't understand," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I run the core systems. The entire platform runs on Cerberus. Who is going to manage it?" Camilla looked momentarily flustered. This was not part of the script. She glanced at Mark. He let out a heavy sigh, as if I was being difficult, as if I was the one creating an awkward situation. He finally swiveled his chair to face me. He leaned back, lacing his fingers behind his head, and then he gave me the look. It wasn't a look of anger. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't even pity. It was a smirk, a tiny, self-satisfied little quirk at the corner of his mouth. The look of a man who thinks he has just made a very clever, very shrewd business decision. "Look, Sarah," he said, his voice dripping with a condescending sort of patience. "Let's be blunt here. You're a senior asset. You're at the top of your pay grade. Your expertise is in a legacy system that we're planning to phase out eventually. To be perfectly honest, you've become too expensive. Too expensive." The two words hit me with the force of a physical blow. All the air went out of my lungs. 18 years of my life. The late nights, the weekends, the missed birthdays, the passion, the loyalty, the sheer force of will that had kept this company running, all of it was reduced to a number on a spreadsheet that was too high. The smirk. That's the part I will never, ever forget. It was the smirk of a stranger. The man I had built a dream with in a garage was gone. In his place was this cold, calculating executive who looked at me and saw nothing but a cost center. The smirk told me everything. It told me he didn't value my history. It told me he didn't respect my contribution. It told me he thought he was outsmarting me. And in that moment, something inside me broke. But it didn't spill out as tears or shouting. It was a clean, silent break. It was the sound of a bond, 18 years in the making, shattering into a million pieces. I just stared at him. The smirk faltered a little under my silent gaze. "Okay," I said, just that one word. Camilla, relieved, slid the folder across the desk towards me. "This is your severance package, Sarah. We've been generous. It includes 3 months' pay and your vested options. Generous. 3 months. For 18 years? It was a joke. A slap in the face. I didn't even look at it. I just turned around and walked out of the room. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't say anything else. I just left him there in his glass box with his smug little smirk and his disastrous, catastrophic, company-ending mistake. He just had no idea yet. The walk back to my desk was the longest walk of my life. The world seemed to move in slow motion, the sounds of the office muffled as if I were underwater. I could feel eyes on me, glances, the quick look away. People knew. Of course they knew. News like that travels through an office at the speed of light, a silent
toxic shockwave. No one said a word to me. They were afraid of being associated with me, afraid that they might be next. A young man from HR, someone I'd never seen before, was waiting for me at my desk. He held an empty cardboard box. "I'm here to assist you," he mumbled, looking at his shoes. Assist me. He was there to make sure I didn't steal any company property, to make sure I didn't make a scene, to escort me from the premises like a common criminal. I started packing. My hands moved on their own, a numb, mechanical motion. 18 years of life reduced to the contents of the single, sad, brown box. In went the books on programming languages that were now obsolete. In went the collection of coffee mugs, each one a relic from a different era of the company. In went my worn-out ergonomic mouse, molded perfectly to the shape of my hand from 100,000 hours of work. I picked up the little rubber duck that sat on top of my monitor. It's a programmer thing. You explain your problem to the duck, and in talking it out, you often find the solution. That duck had heard more of my secrets, my frustrations, and my triumphs than any person. I tossed it in the box. Then my hand hovered over the last thing on my desk. It was the photo, the one of me and Mark in the empty office all those years ago. I looked at his smiling, hopeful face. I looked at mine. I thought about his smirk, and I left the photo on the desk. He could have it. A little reminder of the person he used to be. The HR kid walked me to the elevator. My team members watched me go. A few of them, the ones who had been there for years, had tears in their eyes. They knew what this meant, not just for me, but for them, for the company. The final indignity was being walked through the lobby, with the big, glossy Innovire logo on the wall behind it. The logo I had helped design. The security guard, a kind man named Frank, who I always chatted with in the mornings, just gave me a sad nod as I pushed through the glass doors for the last time. And then I was on the street, in the gray afternoon light, holding my box. The city noise rushed in. The traffic, the sirens, the people talking. It was over. I stood there on the pavement for a long time, and as the initial shock started to recede, a new feeling began to creep in. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't even anger. Not yet. It was a cold, quiet, and grim sense of inevitability. Here's the thing they didn't understand. The thing that Mark, in his infinite C-suite wisdom, never bothered to ask. The thing that smug new COO Bryce could never see on a spreadsheet. Cerberus was not just old code. It was not a legacy system. It was a living, breathing, cantankerous creature, and I was its keeper. I was the only one who knew its moods, its weaknesses, its secrets. I was the only one who knew how to keep it from turning on its masters. I never sabotaged a single thing at Innovire. I wouldn't. That's not who I am. My pride in my work, in the thing that I had built, was too strong. But I didn't have to sabotage anything. A complex system, left untended by anyone who truly understands it, will sabotage itself. It's a law of nature. It's entropy. Let me tell you what they were about to discover. Let me tell you about the time bombs I had been silently, diligently diffusing for years. First, there was what I called the ghost ledger. You see, when we acquired a smaller company back in 2009, their database structure was a nightmare. It never fully integrated with ours. So every 2 weeks, on a Friday afternoon, a tiny, almost imperceptible data drift would occur between our main customer database and our billing system. It was minuscule, but cumulative. Over time, it would lead to clients being undercharged or, worse, overcharged. It would create a cascade of billing errors that would be impossible to untangle. My solution? A semi-manual reconciliation process. A custom-built script that I would run, which would flag the discrepancies, and then I would spend an hour manually patching the records. It was tedious, it was inefficient, and there was absolutely no documentation for it anywhere except in my head. They had just fired the only person who knew the ghost in the machine even existed. Then there was the governor script. Our site traffic was spiky. We'd be fine for weeks, and then a big client would run a promotion or we'd get a mention in the press and our traffic would increase by 1,000% in the matter of minutes. The modern, off-the-shelf, auto-scaling solutions could never react fast enough. They'd spin up new servers, but by then it was too late. The initial servers had already crashed. So I wrote a custom script, a predictive load balancer. It watched for the precursors of a traffic spike and preemptively allocated resources. It was a delicate, handwritten piece of art. It looked archaic to the new kids. They would see it, assume it was inefficient, and replace it with their shiny new textbook solution. And the first time a real traffic spike hit, the whole site would go down hard. And the biggest one, the scariest one, the data labyrinth. The very core of Cerberus, the tables that held our most critical customer data, was built on a database technology from 2004. It was fast, it was stable, but it was quirky. The way it indexed and linked data was completely non-intuitive. It was a maze, and I was the only one left who had the map tattooed on my brain. For years, I had been protecting that data like a dragon guarding its hoard. Any attempt to migrate it or clean it, or even run a complex query without knowing the exact safe path through the labyrinth would trigger a cascade of foreign key violations that would, and I'm not exaggerating, corrupt the data irreversibly. I stood there on the curb, the box of my life getting heavy in my arms. I looked back up at the gleaming tower, at Mark's window on the top floor. He was probably up there, feeling proud of himself, feeling like he'd cut the fat, streamlined the operation. He had no idea that he hadn't just fired an employee, he had fired the system's immune system. He had fired the foundation. I didn't plant any bombs. I didn't have to. I just built the house, and I was the only one who knew about the deep, structural cracks in the foundation. All they had to do was live in it. And gravity, my friends, always wins. The clock was now ticking, and I was the only one in the world who could hear it. The first week was strange, deeply, profoundly strange. For 18 years, my life had been governed by alarms. The 6 a.m. alarm to get up, the alerts from the server monitor that would go off at all hours, the phantom vibration of my phone in my pocket, that constant low-grade anxiety that something, somewhere was on fire and needed me to put it out. And now, silence. I woke up on the first Wednesday morning without an alarm. The sun was already up. I lay in bed for a long time, just listening to the quiet. It was both terrifying and intoxicating. I felt like a deep-sea diver who had surfaced too quickly. The pressure was gone, and I didn't know how to breathe in the thin air of normal life. I started to reclaim my time in small ways. I went to the nursery and bought vegetable plants. I spent an entire afternoon in the sun, my hands in the dirt, building a small garden in my backyard. I could feel the tension that had been coiled in my shoulders for 2 decades start to slowly, painfully unwind. I went to a bookstore and bought a stack of novels I'd always meant to read. I sat on my porch and read for hours, with no emails to check, no code to review. I was trying so hard not to think about an Ovire, not to wonder what was happening inside that glass tower. But it was a phantom limb. I'd find myself mentally running through the nightly batch jobs, wondering if they'd executed correctly. I'd see a news article about a competitor, and my first instinct would be to think about how it affected our market position. Our market position, the habit was so deeply ingrained. I was trying to let it go, trying to detox from the company that had been my entire world. The first call came 10 days after my firing. A Friday afternoon. I was in my kitchen, wiping dirt off my hands, looking at the tiny green tomato plants I had just put in the ground. My phone buzzed, an unknown number from the city. My heart gave a little jolt. I almost didn't answer it. Curiosity, or maybe a dark, unacknowledged part of me, won out. I swiped to answer. Hello? Sarah? Is this Sarah? This is she? Oh, thank God. Hi, Sarah. My name is Alex. I'm one of the junior engineers at Innovire. I know I'm not supposed to be calling you. I'm really sorry to bother you. Really. I stayed silent. I knew this call was coming. I just didn't think it would be so soon. It's the bi-weekly billing reconciliation. It's spitting out garbage. The numbers are all wrong. Thousands of them. No one here knows what this report is even supposed to do. We found your name in some of the old commit logs. Do you have any idea what could be causing it? And there it was, the ghost ledger, rattling its chains for the first time. The tiny data drift had accumulated over 2 cycles. It wasn't a rounding error anymore.
It was a full-blown financial discrepancy, and they were blind. A strange feeling washed over me. It wasn't glee. It wasn't happiness. It was a cold, quiet, satisfying calm. It was the feeling of a physicist who predicts a particle will appear and then sees the exact right track in the cloud chamber. It was validation. I took a slow breath. I looked out the window at my fledgling garden. I said, "I'm sorry, Alex," and my voice was perfectly even, perfectly polite. "I can't help you." "Oh," he said, the air going out of him, "but you built it, didn't you?" My knowledge of that system was part of my employment with Innovire. I no longer work there. I don't have access to the systems, and more importantly, I'm under new contractual obligations that prevent me from consulting for other companies. This was a small white lie. I hadn't signed anything yet, but it was an impenetrable wall. "You should probably create a support ticket and direct your questions to your manager." There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear keyboard clicks, people talking in the background. Chaos. "Right," he finally said, his voice small and defeated. "Yeah, okay. I'm sorry to have bothered you." "It's no bother, Alex. Good luck." I hung up the phone. I placed it gently on the counter. Then I walked over to the window and looked out at my little tomato plants, their green leaves reaching for the sun. A small, wry smile touched my lips. It wasn't a grand explosion. It wasn't a dramatic collapse. It was a single, loose thread. And I had just heard the sound of them pulling on it for the first time, the first tremor. And I knew with absolute certainty that the earthquake was coming. Part 6. The Cascade Failure. A week passed, then another. The quiet on my end was absolute. No more calls, no more panicked engineers. But the silence from them was, I suspected, the sound of a frantic, desperate scramble behind the scenes. I didn't have to guess for long. I still had a few friends at Innovire. Good people who had been there for years and who were just as disgusted at what had happened as I was. We had a private, encrypted chat group. It was mostly for sharing old inside jokes and complaining about corporate life. But now it had become my personal window into the slow-motion car crash that was unfolding at my old company. The first message came from Dave, a senior database administrator I'd worked with for 15 years. "Dave, you are not going to believe this. They put the new kid, Kevin, in charge of your old responsibilities." My blood ran cold. Kevin, the arrogant young engineer who had optimized my script and took the whole system down for a weekend. The one who never even apologized? Me. "Oh, no, Dave." "Oh, yes. And the first thing he did was he told everyone that your governor script for load balancing was a piece of antique junk." I knew what was coming next. I could see it playing out in my mind's eye like a disaster film I had already read the script for. Me. "He didn't, Dave. He did. He replaced it with some expensive, off-the-shelf, AI-driven auto-scaling solution. He gave a whole presentation on it. Bryce and the other VPs were patting him on the back, modernizing the stack, they called it." I just typed back a single word. "When, Dave?" "Tuesday." The following Monday, I got another message. "Dave, it happened." Innovire had launched a huge marketing campaign over the weekend, a partnership with a major online retailer. It was the biggest visibility push in the company's history. The traffic spike hit at 9:01 a.m. on Monday morning, and just as I had predicted, just as I had known it would, the new, shiny, AI-driven solution choked. It couldn't react in time. The primary servers overloaded and crashed. Then the secondary servers. The entire customer-facing platform went down. For 6 hours. 6 primetime business hours on the biggest day of the year. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Tech news sites started reporting on it. Angry customers flooded Twitter. The hashtag InnovireFail was trending. The financial hit was in the millions. The damage to their reputation was incalculable. This, I knew, was the tipping point. The first failure, with the billing, was internal, annoying, but containable. This was public, Humiliating. This was the kind of failure that gets the attention of the board of directors. The worst part was, in their panic, they started making everything worse. Flying blind, with no one who understood the deep architecture of the system, the engineering team started a desperate, frantic hunt for the problem. They thought it was a database bottleneck, and in their infinite wisdom, they decided the solution was to try to migrate a core data table. That's when they stumbled headfirst into the data labyrinth. Dave's next message was frantic. Dave, Sarah, it's a catastrophe. They tried to move the primary customer credential table. They broke it. The foreign key constraints are firing everywhere. Thousands of customer accounts are unlinked. They can't log in. Their data is there, but the system can't see it. It's a 5-alarm fire, and everyone is just throwing gasoline on it. They had done it. They had triggered the doomsday scenario. They had corrupted the core data. This wasn't something you could just fix. This required a level of surgical precision and historical knowledge that only one person possessed. And she was currently pruning her tomato plants. The professional call came that afternoon. It was from the VP of Engineering, a man named Robert I'd always respected, but who had stood by silently while Mark and HR did their dirty work. His voice, usually so confident and booming, was strained. Hey, Sarah, he said, skipping the pleasantries. Robert here. Robert, I replied, my voice neutral. Look, Sarah, I'm not going to beat around the bush. We're in a bad way here. A very bad way. We've had a series of cascading system failures. I saw that on the news. I said, unable to resist the small jab. He let out a tired sigh. Yes, well, It's worse than the news is reporting. We need help. We need your help. I'm sorry to hear you're having trouble, Robert, but as I explained to one of your engineers, I am no longer an employee. We know that, he said quickly, the desperation leaking through. We want to hire you back as a consultant, a very, very well-paid consultant. Sarah, you can name your price. Just write a number on a piece of paper and I will get it approved. No questions asked. We just need you to come in and stabilize things. Please. I let the silence hang on the air for a moment. I could hear the desperation, the panic. They were finally realizing the hole they were in, but they still didn't get it. They thought it was about money. They thought they could just buy my knowledge. The knowledge they had literally thrown out the door a few weeks ago because it was too expensive. It was never about the money. It was about the smirk. It was about the word eliminated. It was about the 18 years they had dismissed as a legacy cost. Robert, I said, and my voice was calm and final, I appreciate the offer. I really do. But my decision is not about money. I've already signed an exclusive agreement with a new venture, and I'm legally not able to take on any outside consulting work at this time. Another white lie, but a necessary one. I wish you and the team the very best of luck in resolving your issues. I could hear him about to protest, to plead, but I just said, I have to go now. Goodbye, Robert. And I hung up. I stood there in my kitchen, the phone in my hand. This wasn't about revenge. I told myself that over and over. This was a lesson. A very hard, very expensive lesson in value. They had thrown away the master key to their own kingdom, and now they were standing outside the gates begging to be let back in. But the thing was, I wasn't the gatekeeper anymore. I had walked away, and I wasn't ever going back. The cascade was in full effect, and the person who had started it all hadn't even called yet, but I knew he would. Oh, I knew. Innovair didn't so much collapse as it was absorbed. A few months after that final voicemail, what was left of the company was acquired in a fire sale by a larger, duller competitor. They didn't want the technology. God, no. Cerberus was a radioactive mess by that point. They just wanted the client list. They paid pennies on the dollar, stripped it for parts, and then shut it down. The gleaming glass tower is now home to an insurance company. The Innovair logo is gone. Mark was ousted by the board weeks before the sale was finalized. He disappeared. I heard through the grapevine that he moved out of state. He's no longer in the tech world. He's just gone, a ghost. A cautionary tale that other CEOs probably tell each other in hushed tones. And me?
And me? She takes a slow sip of her tea. She looks around her bright, clean office. There's a whiteboard behind her covered in interesting diagrams. It feels like a place of calm, focused creation. She smiles, a genuine, peaceful smile. This is my new dawn. I took the severance money, the money from the stock options I was forced to cash out, and I took a long vacation. I went to Spain. I walked part of the Camino de Santiago. I spent a month just walking, thinking, and letting the dust of the last decade settle. And I realized something. I wasn't grieving the loss of my job. I was celebrating the return of my life. When I came back, I started my own company, a small, specialized consulting firm. It's called Foundation Code. And we do one thing. We go into established, successful companies that are running on aging, complex, legacy systems, and we help them stabilize, modernize, and build a bridge to the future without burning down the house. I am, ironically, doing for others what Innovere refused to let me do for them. And I am very, very good at it. My first two hires were Dave, the database administrator, and a few other senior people who had the good sense to abandon the sinking ship that was Innovere. We work on our own terms. We choose our clients carefully. We value deep knowledge and experience above all else. We're not trying to be a billion-dollar unicorn. We're just trying to do good, honest, important work. And we are incredibly successful. I work fewer hours now. I make more money. I have time for my garden, which I'm happy to report produced an obscene number of tomatoes this year. I have time for friends, for travel, for myself. The lesson in all of this, the thing I wanted to share with you, is this. Mark said I was too expensive, but he was a man who only understood price, not value. The price of my salary was a number on a spreadsheet. It was a tangible, easily quantifiable cost that he thought he could cleverly eliminate. But the value of my knowledge, the value of my 18 years of institutional memory, of my intricate understanding of a system no one could tame, that was priceless. And you don't understand the value of something like that until it's gone. And by then, it's always too late. So if you are ever in a place where you feel like you are being taken for granted, where your contribution is overlooked, where someone with a calculator and no soul tries to tell you your worth, remember this story. Don't get angry. Don't waste your energy seeking revenge. Just know your value. Know it deep in your bones. And if they can't see it, that is their problem, not yours. Trust that one day the bill for their ignorance will come due. I didn't have to burn that bridge to my past. I just stopped holding it up for everyone else. And I used the stones to build my own foundation, a foundation that no one can ever take away from me again.
If you liked this story, please share it with your friends and family. Comment down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And of course, give this video a like. It really helps a lot.